I don't think I'd be exaggerating if I said that the Witcher trilogy of games is the greatest example of a dark horse success story in modern gaming. Starting from the niche beginnings of a highly alternate PC only RPG in 2007, before concluding with the huge mainstream critical and commercial success achieved by The Wild Hunt in 2015, these games would make for interesting discussion material regardless of their quality as actual games. However, it hasn't exactly been a straightforward progression of the series' success matching an increase in the quality of the games themselves, and sometimes it's actually been the opposite. From a storytelling perspective, the series has never really managed to regain the peaks it achieved in the first Witcher, and while The Witcher 3 managed to wrap the series up in an excellent way, The Witcher 2 is a real low point in the series. Taking all this into account then, there's plenty of valuable information on how to make a great game, how to fuck up making a great game, to be learnt from critically examining the design and execution of the series. The purpose of these videos is going to be an attempt to understand the methods and design that have made The Witcher games some of the best out there. In these videos, I want to show the ways in which each game's development team and their commitment to creating beautiful, believable worlds, along with their respect and consideration for the player, has at times produced some of gaming's most engaging and inspiring work. I want to do the best I can to display and examine the excellent work done by CD Projekt Red in all their Witcher games, but I also want to examine where they went wrong. Specifically, how missteps made in design and storytelling throughout the series nearly undermine the whole experience in some places. This won't be done for the sake of nitpicking, but to get the best overall understanding of the series, the good and the bad. I should state here though, that these issues never really ruin any one of these games, and even at its lowest point, this series is excellent when compared to its contemporaries. All entries in this series can at the very least be safely regarded as excellently produced and engaging works, but they are not in any way equal to each other. Examining the games, and finding out where they each succeeded and failed, will show this, as well as revealing which individual game is the most accomplished. Some small disclaimers before I dive in. First, I'm going to be making these videos specifically for people who have played at least one of these games, or at least know the basics of the universe. I won't be giving out detailed explanations of basic concepts, or giving detailed lore about the world. If you're as sick as me of hearing discussions of this game begin with something along the lines of Tolkien-esque fantasy world, but with a twist, I'm sure this will all come as a relief. Second, this is going to be as complete an examination as I can make, so there will naturally be huge spoilers throughout for all the Witcher games, as well as any other games I bring up. Consider yourself warned from this point on. Last but not least, I'll be looking at the version of each game that the developers have essentially declared final at the time of this recording. So when I talk about The Witcher 1, I'll be talking about Witcher 1 Enhanced Edition. When I talk about The Witcher 2, I'll be talking about Witcher 2 Enhanced Edition. And when I talk about The Witcher 3, it'll just be plain old Witcher 3. I'm going to talk about each game in a general way, but at the same time try to keep focus on how each game handles what I see as four core aspects of the series. Each game's narrative and gameplay context, how they handle character, how they approach combat, and how they treat choice. I'll go through each game with each of these themes in mind after I said something about the series' presentation. The one area of the games which even the strongest critics would have to concede as exceptional is the series' visual and audio presentation. Every game sets a new benchmark for how any RPG should graphically and sonically present their world and characters. Visually, I haven't played a game with forests as unnerving and alive as those in Flotsam, or felt the rain falling as it falls in Vizima's temple quarter. The ambience and music for all three entries are excellent as well, and round off the visual presentation perfectly. There is, however, a strong caveat to all this, concerning the last and arguably most important audio aspect of a story-heavy series like The Witcher, and that's voice acting. While The Witcher 2 and Witcher 3 maintain the series' high degree of quality throughout their running time by having some of the most varied and consistently well done voice acting in any modern game, The Witcher 1 is a game that features notably bad voice acting in places. Many characters commit the cardinal sins of voice acting quite frequently in this game, by speaking in strange or inappropriate tones, sometimes expressing the wrong emotion for the situation, or expressing no emotion at all. As if this wasn't bad enough, characters within the game sometimes don't even animate like real people. Compared to the expertly animated and directed conversations in The Witcher 3, the population of The Witcher 1 speak like robots and move like mannequins, creating a significant barrier to actually connecting with what they're saying at times. The only excuse for this strikingly poor level of quality in an otherwise expertly produced series is the developers' relative inexperience with their first entry. This was easily remedied as the series went on, but it still remains an unfortunate flaw within the first Witcher. So I'm going to start talking about the games individually from this point on, starting with the first game and the first topic, context. The first Witcher game begins the series with a short introduction that gives some small detail about the world. It is the year 1270, and the Northern Kingdoms are still recovering from barely having beaten the Nilfgaardian Empire 5 years ago at the Battle of Brenna. The shockwaves produced by this war are still being devastatingly felt by the common folk of the north, with famine and suffering being commonplace. In addition to this, the frequent raids and attacks committed by non-human organisation the Scoia'tael on the common population has caused the already tense relations between humans and non-human minorities in the north to reach a boiling point. In the middle of all this turmoil, legendary Witcher Geralt of Rivia, the main player character for the entire series, has reappeared at the Witcher headquarters of Kaer Morhen after having been thought dead for 5 years. It's not clear how or why he's suddenly back in the land of the living, as he unfortunately now suffers from amnesia and has forgotten everything about his highly eventful life. Gameplay wise, this means Geralt is basically a blank slate. He knows the basics of his Witcher skills like sword fighting and alchemy, but none of the advanced techniques of any of these. Geralt ultimately has little time to recover, however, as Kaer Morhen soon comes under attack by an unknown organisation. Geralt helps in the defence of the fortress, but can't stop the villains from stealing the Witcher mutagens as well as killing a fellow Witcher. Geralt agrees to help his comrades in retrieving the stolen secrets and in destroying the dangerous organisation that perpetrated these crimes, Salamandra. Along the way, Geralt and the player learn more about the world and Geralt's past, coming to their own conclusions on both in a questline fittingly titled Identity. When assessing the context given in the first game, we can see that the way in which the introduction sequence gives a general outline of the world, as well as the fact that the main character is an amnesiac, ultimately means that the developers have designed the game specifically for those who know nothing about the given universe. CD Projekt Red has further specially designed the main character and the narrative to develop throughout the story from the perspective of someone who knows nothing of this world, a state that fits both their intended player and their presentation of Geralt perfectly. Now, this might seem like a basic storytelling mechanic to use, but it's something that does get lost further on in the series, so it's vital that we address it here. Additionally, the inclusion of the identity questline is a bit of a masterstroke, as it allows the player to harmonise their political and moral views with the main character. For instance, Geralt can just as easily become characterised as a persecutor of non-humans as he can be a champion of them, all dependent on player choice. I should address some of the more consistent criticism that's usually brought up against this characterization of Geralt, particularly his amnesiac state. This player character with amnesia storytelling mechanic is nothing new, and is in fact so common in video games that quite a few people consider it to be a detriment to any game it features in, due to it being seen as a cliched or lazy way of telling a story. I've seen this accusation levelled against The Witcher a few times. Anyone presenting this criticism does have a point to a certain extent. I've long ago lost count of the amount of times I've had to play as someone suffering from some form of memory loss in a game. But the frequency of any storytelling device in a given art form is ultimately irrelevant. It's the use of these devices and the telling of the story overall that ultimately matters the most. The best examples that can be given to support this view is the presence of the amnesiac main character device in some of gaming's best stories, from Planescape Torment to the Knights of the Old Republic. The execution of this device within these games is done excellently and only serves to greater enhance their stories, and the same is true of The Witcher. Like the Nameless One or Revan, Geralt's position as an important but amnesiac figure of his universe means that he and the player are united in their strong interest to engage and discover facts about his past and the world. Ultimately, the context set by The Witcher 1 and its achievements in synchronizing the motivations and interests of the player and player character provides an excellent foundation for the rest of the story to build off.